Welcome back. In this video we will be talking about types of text. Well, we've talked about block level elements before, and we've talked about how they span the width of the page, but we also have something called the inline elements. The inline elements are different. The inline elements do not span the width of the page, they just go as far as they need to, and they can be stacked next to each other in a line. Then, for example, if I go next to image here, and then I add another image, and since I don't have images, I'm just going to add the same image. And I will close that. And if I refresh, you can see that these two images are now on the same line. It didn't have to place them on separate lines, on different lines. It just added them together, and this is because they're inline elements. Just adds a little space between them and places them on the same line. If it's at the end of the web page, it'll start a new line and place them there. Usually, multiple inline elements would be located inside of one block level element. Like, for example, a paragraph. This paragraph here can contain this paragraph, and it can also contain something else next to it. So see, this paragraph spans down to here, and I can add this picture next to it again. But inside, so it's next to the text renders, and then the picture renders right next to it. See, text ends, picture stores on the same line. However, for example, if this picture was inside of another paragraph element, and yes, I'm adding it inside of a paragraph element, See? This is called nesting. You can nest multiple different elements inside of the same element. The idea is to remember to close the element after you've opened it. So see, if I hover over this B, it closes here. If I hover over this B, it closes here. And this is good nesting. And because these are both P's, it's going to be easier for us to keep track of them. But this is the idea behind block level elements. What are different examples of block level elements? Well, we have span. Span is a block level element, as an inline element. We have A. A just references A as an anchor, which basically means this is an anchor for a different page. Then you can have an A, and it has the attribute href, and then you can go to let's call it Google. Now, if I refresh, you can see that I have right now a link to Google. But of course, this is not relative, so actually, this is a good exercise into making it relative. Let's add a / in here, and let's refresh this page, and let's try it again. Oh, see Google. This is the very top of your directory. Okay, so we can also have, I already talked about how the image is also an inline element. Now, between different block level elements, the browser automatically adds spaces. And then if I have this, and this P is a block level element, if I copy it, and I go and I add another one right here, and I refresh, you can see that these exist, but in the middle, there's a white space to separate them. I can add another one, and it'll do the same thing. It'll add a white space in between them to separate visually. So let's talk more about semantic elements, which means elements that actually mean something. Like, for example, if you have text and you need to make part of it italic, for example. Let's say this part here I need to emphasize it, I need to make it italic, so it's EM surrounded with by EM, and that's it, you're done. Now again, something about this, see, it becomes italic. Something about this is not going to, you're not going to always use this because you will be using CSS most of the time, but sometimes you're going to need it. Let's say this paragraph, for example, I need to emphasize in a way that makes it pop out. So let's say we want to make this bold. Well, if you want to make this bold, you have an element that does this for you. You have the stroke there. Again, it's an element, it's an inline element, which means that it goes in line with the rest of it. And if you add it and refresh, you can see that the part that's in the middle of that inline element and the actual body of that inline element becomes affected. Now, remember how we said if you add a lot of spaces, they would be ignored. As in, so if I add this and I refresh, I won't be able to see them. Well, if you want to, for some reason, you can tell the browser that, listen, this is pre-formatted code, do not change my formatting by using the pre tag. They add pre before and pre after your element, after your content, say here. And then you refresh, and guess what? Now you have your spaces. Didn't change a thing, it respected your formatting. There's also a line element called quote, which is referred to as a Q keyword. So now if I add quote here and refresh, you'll see that that part is now considered a quote. And that is realized by adding a quotation mark around it. But what if I need this quote to be separate from the rest of my page? Well, then you can use the block quote. The block quote is just like the quote, but instead of it being inline, it takes it and it puts it in its own area. It's not inline anymore. It's a block. It's now a block level element. One more thing. Let's go in here and say after this part, I want this to be on a separate line. If I do this, it doesn't do anything. But I can add br, /br, and br, all it's going to do is just separate. It's a line separator. If I can add another one here. And look, even though this BR is on the same line as this BR, but it just says, hey, listen, create a new line, and then it starts rendering again. I can do it again, I can do it here. And now, every time I use it, it's going to be there. Now again, most of the formatting should not be done in this way. It should always go to CSS, but it's good knowledge to have. HTML code can be commented, just like any other code. But to comment HTML code, all you have to do is just add the exclamation mark, minus, and your comment. And of course, you have to close it. And that basically creates a comment that you are able to use. Oh, no, like so. So you can add as many of those as you want. Now if I save and refresh my page, it doesn't show up because it's a comment. Of course, if I inspect my page, look at my actual code, you'll see the comment, but it doesn't show up on the page because it's not part of it, per se. The last thing we'll talk about here is the HTML encoding. So let's say over here, I would like to add a piece of HTML code. For example, if you would like to display so if I want to do this, you can see it just gives me a paragraph. So if you'd like to display this, and then paragraph, it just goes down there because now it's considered its own paragraph. But I don't want this. I just want this as HTML code. I want it to show up as HTML code. Well, different HTML characters have a set value. If you know the set value, you can use the AND. This was greater than, lesser than. And this one, and we needed the P, because we want to do paragraph, and then P, and then and again, and the symbol for the other one, which was greater than, and that. So now, if I save this and run it, the first symbol will be converted into a lesser than, then the P will be printed normally, and then the and greater than and GT will be printed as the actual symbol. Now notice that these don't print because of the same problem. And lesser than P and greater than. And now if you go here, it displays properly as we wanted it to display as HTML code. Now, there are a lot of different symbols that have their own encoding, but this is what is called HTML encoding, and you can find a list of these symbols on the link that is provided on your lecture slides. That would be all for type of text. In the next video, we'll be talking about lists and tables. So until then.